tedious.
So first impressions out of the box, this stuff it looks really high quality to say the least. Fuel Injector Clinic has their own little box just for the injectors, which is pretty sick. Has the Fuel Injector Clinic logo right on the front there. Quality assured label right there. So I'll be opening that up in just a second. And in the Platinum Racing Products box, some Drift HQ stuff, because that's who I ordered it from. Anyways, here's the bracket that bolts to the head. And all of these are going to be the individual ignition coil packs themselves. And then right here are different length stocks designed so that the R35 coils can sit on the 2JZ without being too long or too short. So that's what these are for, and I'll probably show how to put all that together here pretty soon. I do gotta say, I'm a big fan of the packaging art for this. This looks really sick. Here's all the injectors right here. They're in a nice little foam piece inside with inserts for them to sit inside of. And every Fuel Injector Clinic set of injectors comes with this piece here, which has all the data about the injectors on it. Also has a sticker hidden inside of it. So the flow rate for these was supposed to be 775 cc's per minute, and they're all pretty close to that. You can see for each injector, this is the average number for each, and then this is the average number for all of them at 43.5 psi of fuel pressure. And I'm just gonna pop one out of here so you can see a close-up. It's really pretty. It's got a nice aluminum anodized blue top right here with the Fuel Injector Clinic logo on it. I think it's gonna go really good with the color palette I'm deciding for my motor currently. It's really gonna pop against the fuel rail because it should be about the same color. And then underneath this piece in the little container is all the wire connectors for each of the injectors. So it's really nice of them to put something together that's this nice and well organized. Makes it really easy when it comes to install them later. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and open up one of the coil packs so you can see what these look like. Each of them comes with their own little manual and warranty and all that stuff. But these are made for an R35 GTR. They come with a pretty long stock. As you can see, the new ones that come with the Platinum Racing Products kit are a little bit shorter, and they're designed to fit the 2JZ instead of the VR38. But I'll be changing these out pretty soon whenever I get to installing the coil plate. So if I take one of these lads out of the box here, and I come over here to the 2JZ, ignore the harness. This is just up here because I am looking at things currently. But here's the fuel rail. So this is the fuel rail that came with the Greddy intake plenum. And here's the injector. So the top part of this would be the top. This would go into the engine like so. But the top part of this has a 14mm rubber grommet, which I didn't even know that the size mattered until now. But as you can see, that is far too large to fit inside of that hole. So for these, I'm going to need to get the 11mm grommets that will go around this that can pop inside of there. Luckily, my kit for the intake came with a bunch of fuel injector adapters, so one thing I won't need to be changing is that, because that will pop right down into there, which actually I can show you real quick. Forms a nice snug fit, pops right into the intake manifold runner there, and that will seal all of those all the way across here. I really just got to worry about that washer on the top for now. Good news is I already have those ordered, so those are on the way. In the meantime, I'm going to put these back in the box, and I will move on to why I'm not going to be installing this quite yet. Which, first things first, I'm going to go ahead and open it up and set it down in the head just to make sure, do a quick test fit, see if it's going to work or not. So they said that this bracket was designed to fit with all of the engine heads that they have. All the valve covers, all the engine heads, etc. I'm not really sure how it goes on quite yet, but it looks like it's supposed to fit in between there because there's an angle there. It lines up with all the coil plugs that way. And I slid it forward, and you can see that it does indeed fit in there. The holes that are going to be used are these ones beveled. They have a couple of countersunk screws, or I guess they're Allen heads or something like that, hex head screws. But anyways, those countersunk parts are where this bolts down onto the head itself. and then the coil packs will plug in through here. Now, getting to the reason that I'm not going to be installing it right now is because all of this needs to get painted and done. I still need spark plugs, so there's no point in installing any of the coil packs until I've got spark plugs in the head. The valve covers are already done and painted. Okay, so I got some more things since my last video. Actually, by the way, the last video was not planned. I got locked out of my mailbox for like a week, so everything that came in the mail I was not able to actually use. So made a video just to fill in the time span where I couldn't work on the engine, but I got some things I should be able to progress here. So I've actually got different O-rings for my injectors, so I could probably finally put those on. I finally got my vacuum switching valve that will replace the broken one up there, and a couple other things which I will show you later, but we'll see if I can get some of this on today. It's been really bothering me having these holes taped up for so long. It's not like a bad thing or anything. I just don't like looking at it, all the bright yellow stuck to my engine. But now I can fill the holes. Love filling holes, I really do. It's one of my hobbies at this point. I hope to God that I can actually fit all of these injectors on here, because I don't know if the length of the spacers for the fuel rail and the length of the injectors is the same, but we'll see. Can't remember if I mentioned it already or not, but the reason I am changing out the O-rings on these is because they are too big to fit inside of the fuel rail. So I ordered these from Drift Motion. I got 6 of them, obviously. These are 11 mil. These will fit inside of the fuel rail. These are 14. They are way too big. By the way, I just want to say, Drift Motion, you are the king at shipping things in boxes that are way, way too big for what's inside of them. You really are. This is proving difficult. Got it. It's a little loose, but I'll try to make it work. We'll see. So I found this. This is a O-ring kit. I don't think these are fuel grade, but what I'm going to do is stick one underneath my fuel grade washer, or not washer, O-ring, to lift it up. That way this one will cause the seal and it won't be moving up and down. So this will basically just act as a spacer. And if this one fails, which I don't think it will, this will act as a second barrier. Not that it'll stand up to it for very long. So I'm going to hope that nothing goes wrong with these, but we'll see. We'll see. So I'm going to insert this inside of the fuel rail and let it do its thing. Actually fits quite snugly. I can actually hold it in there, or it holds itself in there. It's pretty sick. Actually, that's gonna look really good. You can see it on camera that this blue matches this blue pretty closely. Nice. Thank you. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this either, but these are adapters. You're gonna need these for fuel injector clinic injectors if you're using the OEM intake runner. I think they're gonna fit just fine. I just need to make sure that my spacers are the right length. I think it's gonna need a spacer and a longer bolt, unfortunately. Let me see if I have anything. Okay, it is now a completely different day, but I now have my fuel rail on. I did have to run to a hardware store to get a couple of bolts, as well as a couple spacers for it, so I'll go ahead and show you that real quick. So right here is the fuel rail, obviously. I found this bracket actually that helps it bolt up. I had to get a couple longer Allen bolts. Let's see if I can actually get one shown there. This guy right here. So the bolts that were included with the kit were too short, so they would go to the end of the spacer here, and then they wouldn't thread into the intake manifold runner. So I went ahead and got little rubber spacers for both of those to match the length of the injectors themselves. So fuel rail's on finally. I was digging around in my shed from all my non-VVTi GE parts, and I found this banjo fitting on one of the intake pieces, and this is almost identical to the one that was on the GTE intake plenum. So this will be my vacuum hose that runs over to my brake booster inside of the 350Z. So that's covered now. I don't have to buy anything for that, which is a huge win. Crankshaft position sensors in. Sorry, camshaft position sensor is in. I did switch out my broken VSV for this brand new one, so that hose is now attached to the back of it. By the way, I've been learning more about what all of these do. So we have multiple different tubes here for different vacuum systems, obviously. They all go to different vacuum switching valves. Most of them control wastegates or exhaust bypasses. I'll probably go into depth more about these when I actually get all of this sorted out and finalized. Before that, I still got a couple of hoses that need fixed. That one's broken, that one's split, which I did find this super handy piece of vacuum hose in the trash at work, so I'm going to cut that and use it for both of those. Now, a huge reason as to why the last video was completely about sensors is because that's when I started trying to figure out more about my harness itself, what I needed in it, how to wire it, and all that. And I'm still nowhere near completely close to being ready to put that together, but I've got a lot better idea of what everything is and what it should be. I tried contacting a couple of places to see if they could help me out. A lot of the time they respond back with something along the lines of the vacuum switching valves that control the turbos being an issue for input and output slots on the ECU, and they keep recommending that I don't use those. I would really like to keep all those so I can have the sequential turbos, so I'm planning to keep those the best I can. If I can't, then I'll just have to rely on the VVTi, and the turbos together will be a true twin setup instead of a sequential twin. But I shouldn't have to do that if I can work the harness for this, the vacuum switching valves, and all the other sensors involved into a standalone with a supporting CAN bus. And the reason for that is because the CAN bus will be able to fill in certain spots on the ECU that normally would be covered up by sensors otherwise. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense if I say it like that, but I'll explain more in depth in a sec. So all the vacuum switching valves here, 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 and the one tucked in right behind here, they are all an auxiliary output sensor. So what that means is that the ECU is sending a signal to those sensors and it controls the sensors that way. The only problem with that is that auxiliary output sensors are very, very limited, and oftentimes the only ECUs that have a lot of those are OEM manufacturing ECUs. Say Toyota's 2JZ GTE ECU had the exact amount of auxiliary outputs designed for this specific engine. Now, when going to standalone, oftentimes they remove a lot of the auxiliary outputs because most people don't need them. So, for instance, a lot of people will do big turbo setups. They don't need 4 vacuum switching valves. The only auxiliary ports they're going to need are for their basic things like switches and gauges and such. Now, that being said, using a CAN bus system, which I'm not really sure what the acronym stands for, but it's the module inside of your car that controls the dash lights and basically communicates with all the other sensors to tell one another whether something's wrong. So if you have a seatbelt not plugged in, your car is going to throw a light saying, hey, seatbelt's not plugged in. If there's a sensor in the system somewhere that's damaged or not functioning properly, other sensors in the system will pick that up and they'll relay that to the ECU, the CAN bus, and then that will relay to the dashboard and throw a light as well saying, hey, something's wrong here. The reason the CAN bus gets rid of certain issues for auxiliary is because it fills in a lot of spots and then it plugs directly into a standalone ECU, taking up a lot less of the space. So technically, if I wire in a lot of auxiliary outputs into the CAN bus, it'll control that and I won't have to wire those auxiliary outputs into the ECU instead. So that will save me space on the ECU, hopefully. At least that's my theory. We'll have to see about that. And if I made that a little too confusing, I'm going to flip the camera around and I'll show you the actual connector from the 2JZ GTE ECU, or not ECU, engine harness, and I'll kind of point some things out, so hopefully it'll make sense if I explain it this way. So at the end of every engine harness, there's going to be connectors. On every ECU, there's also going to be connectors. They aren't necessarily the same, but they all serve the same purpose. So each and every one of these little spots on here is a pin connector hole. And what I'm talking about when I'm talking about auxiliary ports is there are certain spots on this connector and on whatever ECU you get that are assigned as auxiliary output. So in the case of my engine, these sensors, the VSVs, or the vacuum switching valves, are auxiliary output intensive, and therefore they take up a lot of space for the auxiliary outputs. And so using a CAN bus would take care of all the auxiliary outputs that are necessary coming from the 350Z chassis. Now, I'm still not super well informed exactly about what all those sensors might be. I believe it has something to do with like vehicle speed sensors, tachometer, things you typically would want to have working in your car after you do an engine swap. A lot of those require an auxiliary output. So I think I'm correct in saying the tachometer. So you would have a vehicle speed sensor, or actually no, it would be the camshaft and crankshaft position sensors. They'll measure the rotation of the engine at a certain time, and therefore it'll tell you the RPMs. So the RPM would be then sent to the ECU to know the positioning of the motor. Now from the ECU, you could tell your dashboard or your tachometer the exact RPMs based on what your camshaft and or crankshaft sensor are inputting into the ECU. So the sensors input information into the ECU, and the ECU outputs that information to your tachometer. Hopefully that makes sense. That's typically what the auxiliary output sensors are, and just like the tachometer, I should say, the VSV sensors are an output. The ECU reads information, it's mostly vacuum, and then sends that back to those sensors to say, hey, you need to switch this one on and off so that this valve can open or close and such like that. Now, a question I've been getting asked very frequently still, I talked about this in my last video, or actually not the last video, the video before last, is what ECU am I planning on using? So in the video before last, I mentioned the ECU Master EMU Black and the AEM Infinity 506. Now, I may have to change those plans, and the reason for that is if my engine requires a lot of outputs, auxiliary outputs to be specific, then something like the EMU Black, which has a very small amount of auxiliary outputs, won't work. Or I would have to opt for something that has more output pins, such as the AEM Infinity, or even I would have to jump up to the Haltech 2500 Elite series, which is dummy expensive. And I don't really want to spend that money if I don't have to, but if I have to, I will. So my plan right now is to get a professional opinion. So I've already contacted a couple of places, but most recently I just reached out to Wiring Specialties. You guys may know the name. They are very famous for swapping many engines into different cars, or not necessarily swapping them, but making the harnesses that help swap those engines in. Notoriously for a lot of Nissan chassis using RB motors, 2JZs, and LS engines. And so, them being the experts on how to swap things, they would know a lot more about what sensors to use, whether or not certain aspects of the vacuum system on my particular motor might need to be wired into the harness or not. Since they make the harnesses, they would know. But anyways, I know I keep saying anyways a lot. But anyways, I'm going to contact them. I'm going to go over the details of what I want in my engine, and I know basically all the sensors I have or need to know. Actually, my last video details all that, so if you haven't watched it, go watch it. Go watch it. It'll tell you all the sensors you need. Make sure you read the comments, though, because I did miss a couple of things. But anyways, tell Wiring Specialties all the sensors I need, which I have already written out, and also let them know what my desires are. So I want my tachometer, I want my speedometer, I want my AC, all that good stuff. I want everything from the car, from factory, to work with my engine. That's what they make a CAN bus for. So they've got their Rev CAN 2, I believe is what they call it, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that with the information I give them, the parameters I have, and their knowledge of wiring, plus their genius device, the Rev CAN 2, Wiring Specialties will be able to help me choose the right ECU, set up my harness correctly, to get this thing running, driving efficiently, and keep all of my important things inside of the car that were already there. AC, heat, power steering, tachometer, speedometer, all the oil gauges, I guess there's only one, but you know what I mean. I'd like to keep all my nice necessities that came with the car. So hopefully that works out for me. And I really don't know how that's going to go. Like I said, I'm going to be calling them probably tomorrow, if not sometime later this week. As of today, I believe it's Tuesday, around like 11 p.m. Tuesday, and I'm hoping to have this video out early Wednesday, so I will probably be calling them around 11 a.m. Wednesday or around the same time later in the week. So hopefully I'll get a message back, a positive one, because that's the ultimate decider for my ECU at this point. That's the ultimate decider for how I have to wire this, and that's really what's stopping me from having this thing more complete than it is. So yeah, I will contact Wiring Specialties, and I will get back to you guys, because I know that's probably very important to you as well. And with that being said, I believe that is everything I should need to cover in this video. So like usual, if you enjoyed the content, like and subscribe. If you want to see more of my videos, just hit the notification bell to be notified when they come out. And as always, make sure the rest of your day is a great day. Peace out. See you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. It's been really bothering me having these holes taped up for so long. It's not like a bad thing or anything. I just don't like looking at it, all the bright yellow stuck to my engine. But now I can fill the holes. Love filling holes. I really do. It's one of my hobbies at this point.